year. Moving straight on, we've got an agenda. Everybody's had a copy in advance. I'm working off a paper-based one because of technological issues again, so bear with me. First item on the agenda is apologies. Do we have any apologies?
We have apologies for Councillor Repton, Councillor Eyre and Alison Parkin. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kerr?
I will need to go for a meeting at 12 o'clock, so if we haven't finished, I will walk out. Thank you.
If we're still here at 12, and that's noted, thank you. Next item then, if there are no more apologies, is late items to be introduced by the Chair. I don't have any late items as such, but I do just want to welcome everybody to the new year of committee. I want to put on record a quick note of thank you to Councillors Sandu and Mulhall, who are no longer sitting on the committee with us, for their service last year, and a very warm welcome to Councillors Eyre and Councillor Wright for joining us. You're very welcome here. The only thing to keep in mind for this committee is you are welcome. There are no such thing as silly questions. It's important that we get to the truth of the matter rather than we withhold our questions. One of the fundamental bases of audit and governance is that we don't do party politics in here. We cooperate, we work together for the good of the whole council. But very warm welcome. The next item on the agenda are declarations of interests. Are there any? Okay, thank you. Moving on then, the next item on the agenda is to review the minutes of a meeting held on the 27th of March. Everybody's had a copy. Would anybody like to move approval of those meetings? John, thank you. Councillor Wilson, thank you. Any observations or concerns? Okay, thank you. The next item on this agenda then is the Audit and Governance Committee outstanding resolutions, about which we have a report. Can you go through the report?
Thank you, Chair. The only one I really wanted to highlight today is the item on the 27th of March, which is meeting around the committee's self-assessment of effectiveness. One of the things that the committee wanted was for us to put together an action plan. So I met with Tony Dolman and David Webster, who are the two independents that had said that they would like to get involved in this. And we met last week to have a discussion around the items that were highlighted from the self-assessment. And the key issues really coming out of that were around, member of the committee's knowledge, etc. So what we're planning to do is to use the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy's skills and knowledge matrix that appears in their audit committee best practice guidelines. So the aim is to get that out to all members over the next few weeks, just to get an understanding of what the skills mix is amongst the committee. So that's one of the things we want to do. We had a good general chat as well, and there's a couple of other issues that I'm going to actually hand over to David and to Tony, because they raised some good issues where we were chatting. So I thought it might be useful for them just to explain those to the committee as well. Great, yeah, thank you. Are you all placed, Jens?
Okay, shall I kick off? Wasn't quite expecting this, but thank you, Richard. What a good man. I think there were a couple of things. I think, I guess we were looking from a co-opted point of view, and I think one thing we felt was that as co-opted members, it would be useful to be able to meet with the chair and deputy chair of all the other councillors, just to share thoughts informally, not as a formal meeting. I think it's be useful to find out help the context in which we're operating and where we should concentrate, and things that we've found or seen that we might just want to share backwards. And I think one of the parts on the questionnaire was, does the committee meet privately? I'm not saying it should meet privately as a committee, but I think there's an opportunity for the members to perhaps catch up once a quarter, just to talk about things would be quite useful. I think a second thing we talked about sometimes was the representation, as I went from the executive. So we know Alison comes and Richard's here, and Richard gets a lot of questions, but he's almost the wrong person we should be asking. And I think sometimes we might struggle with representations from the actual leadership being present. And I think one of the best practice things was the chief executive being here in the questionnaire or in the best practice. And we don't always see Paul Simpson at this meeting, and that's fine. But that might be something we want to think about enhancing representation from the business leaders. So there are a couple of things we talked about. David?
No, I think that covered it. I can't think of anything else that we raised, unless Richard can remind me of something I've forgotten.
But I think we can take some of those things, and if anything, that's a good thing. We can work on a plan with Richard to sort of flesh out how that might be and how that might work without being too onerous for members and the leaders of the council too.
Yep, okay, thanks, gents. Great feedback, and I appreciate the time you've put into it, and thank you, Richard, as well. Yeah, of course, discussions can continue outside of committee, but let's try and resolve as much as we can today and keep the wheels moving. So, in terms of a skills assessment, I assume we're just prepared to go for that. We don't need to do any more preparation. We can just kick that off. Can we do that then? Thank you. Any objections to that, by the way? Any comments or concerns? No? Okay, great. That will happen then. That's resolved. In terms of pre-briefing, you'll be delighted to know that discussions have already taken place in a pre-meeting between Vice Chair, myself and officers, and we've already highlighted that to be a good idea, and I'm happy to resolve that will happen, provided there are no concerns or objections. Councillor Wilson.
Sorry, can I just check when you say meeting privately, because obviously it's a democratic, meeting, and we should be aware of what's been said. That's my only sort of question about that.
I guess from my perspective, it was more around the members being able to meet. Yeah, I've no problem with meeting with, chair or the vice chair or the members. It was just being able to have those conversations that you can't always maybe have in this forum.
I may say, we used the term private meeting. It's perhaps an informal meeting as opposed to a formal committee meeting that we're talking about.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
I love the passion for transparency, and I'm 100% behind it. So these informal meetings, as we'll describe them, are open, they're not restricted, and I'm happy to resolve that again unless there are any concerns or objections. Okay, we can make arrangements for that. And Councillor Kerr?
In terms of people's time and availability, could we schedule those to be either before or after standing committee meetings so it doesn't interrupt people's days unduly?
I'm sure that can be considered. Yeah, thank you. The other thing that I heard there was about leadership representation. Again, work is in progress. I'm not sure that I can think of anything to resolve straight away, but it's something to keep in mind. Paul Simpson actually did suggest he may attend today, but I do want to appreciate his diary is probably a nightmare, and he couldn't come because he's not here. But he's aware we could do work to raise awareness across the rest of the leadership team.
So I'll add one thing to that, sorry. I think we'll come on to it in Richard's audit report. There's a lot of challenges for resource, and there's a number of audits are late or delayed and recommendations slip. I think a lot of it's toned from the top. So if you can get the leadership here, that promulgates down into the teams that are doing these things, and without that tone from the top, things are sometimes difficult to make traction on.
That's a great catchphrase, tone from the top. Yep, thank you. It's good points. We'll keep them in mind for now rather than resolve anything on it. Was that the only comment you wanted to make on the outstanding resolutions? Do any members or have any questions or concerns? Mr. Sunderland.
Just in the couple of things in there, bit sort of light on dates like the Alistair Hall golf course that we've been currently making this for some time. Incorporated into future reports, Sarah. I mean, Sarah Walker's obviously does a lot of work on these things. That's mainly what I think we need to pin down. Just pin down one or two items of actually say, well, when will they arrive? I think that's the main issue. I think I've got with this report, that it really needs to tie in something. And just obviously Alison's not here. Do we know whether the formal complaint to EY was actually sent? Have we had a response?
I'm not aware.
27th of March 24, we talked about submit a formal complaint to EY. Was it done?
It's in draft. It's not been sent yet, but there is a draft being circulated.
So it is to be sent. Sorry, it is to be sent.
Yes.
Not gone yet. Yeah.
No, not gone yet.
Thank you.
Sorry, I assumed you meaning an inbound complaint. We're talking about our complaint to
Yeah, that's right.
external auditors.
You have that complaint to them. Yes, that's right.
With you.
That's what I was
I can
talking
update
about.
you on that. Yes, I met with Alison and Paul Simpson last week. We discussed the matter. The letter is drafted. It is ready to go. We are going to time our run carefully. So that means it's not been sent, and there's no immediate plan to send it until the resolution of the matter at council next week in terms of the leadership. We want to wait for that to resolve. The second matter that we want to resolve is the national government's guidance on whether or not councils will be accepting the risk of old accounts not being properly signed off. That's not likely to resolve until well after the general election. So the last thing we wanted to do was to throw this letter in now, and it's lost in the noise. We want to wait until things are a little more settled and the letter will actually arrive at the right person's desk at the right time. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, quite clearly, the whole issue of audits and delays audits and the rest of these things is all sort of gone out the window, and all these proposals to change the certificates and all that thing has all gone out the window. So nothing's going to happen now for some significant time. I don't imagine any government coming in, whoever they may be, who's going to have that number one on their agenda. But, you know, quite clearly, it is fairly crucial to local government, not just here, but across the whole of England and Wales. And it really does need some issues. And, you know, we need to make sure that anybody who has any knowledge of these things, any local MPs or anything like that after the election, is aware of our issues so they can press for it to be sorted out as soon as possible. Thank you.
That's a good point. After the election, I think we'll be in a better position to lobby for more support on that, together with EY, as a united front if possible.
Other than just EY, obviously our issues are a lot of issues with EY, but there are other issues which are national issues, which are not EY's. They are central government and the issues about external audit across the whole of local government. And that needs to be sorted at some stage. But, you know, nothing we can do about it. I suggest a limited amount that EY can do about it. But, you know, but after the election, we need to be lobbying to ensure that whatever we can do, you know.
Yeah, I think what we'll do after the general election, I'll revisit with Alison and Paul Simpson and reassess the situation we find ourselves in at the time. That's the update on that. I saw a couple of hands. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. This is something we resolved in March, which is several months ago. The fact that a general election has come along since then, and the fact there's been no national statement about the whole shambles, is not our fault. But I think we shouldn't be waiting. I think that we could be waiting another 6 months before this gets to the top of the new government's agenda. And you know, by that time, this is becoming ancient history. And my feeling is that actually to send it now, while people are feeling a bit more politically aware and the media is a bit more politically alert than usual, actually could be better timing, and they could feel a bit more that this is something that we do need to address. They may not want to send an answer, they'll send us a holding answer back, which I think they probably have done anyway. But I think we ought to be putting it there on the table. If we don't get a substantive answer, then we can chase it up. If we haven't sent it, we can't chase it.
Yeah, that's not without merit. Interesting to hear the other thoughts of the committee before we come to a final decision on that. Councillor Wright, and then...
Yeah, my point wasn't in relation to that, so if you want to cover those points first, I'll come back.
Councillor Bolton?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Bearing in mind the last meeting was the 27th of March, and here we are now in June, I am concerned that the letter hasn't gone. So what's happened in the time in between? We didn't know until the end of May about the general election, so why have you made the general election an excuse for not sending the letter in March? I just think it's very poor that A, we weren't updated on this anyway, that you weren't going to send the letter because you didn't want to, but B, we made the decision to send it and I assumed it would go early April. And here we are in June and the letter has still not gone. And I think your reasoning is political. You opened up the committee by saying we are not a political committee. And yet I think you've just been a little bit hypocritical by saying you're leaving it till after the general election. And the other phrase you used, until there's some stability on the council so we know who's going to be leader. That is political in my view. This committee isn't political, as you said yourself in your opening remarks. So I believe that letter should have been sent.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Mr Sunderland?
Could I just come back on that? Because I think what Sarah's made is a very good point there, because it is in a sense, as the election is irrelevant as far as EY is concerned, because EY is still there. Well, we assume they're still there because we don't see them here, do we? And so, you know, they're not here again. So, you know, EY are still not here. They're still not attending. The issues are still around. Whether Alison or staff see the EY people or hear from them, we don't know yet. Obviously, that can be reported separately. And as Sarah puts it, the meeting back in March was resolved to do this, and we are now several months on, and nothing's happened. And it ain't going to happen in the next 6 months. So, you know, we're going to be, not as far as national audit is concerned, so we're going to be 6 months on, and we can still use the same excuses for not sending the letter. I think realistically the letter should go as soon as it could do. Personally, that's my personal view. I think exactly what Sarah said is entirely correct, and I would back that up.
Okay, thank you. So, does anybody else have a view on this before we move to some sort of a resolution on it? Okay.
I propose the letter should be sent forthwith.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody want to second that? The two hands at the same pace. I shall just pick one. Councillor Wright. All those in favour? And against? It's resolved then that the letter shall be sent immediately, as soon as Alison's on her way. So as soon as Alison returns, let's have a meeting and we can explain what's been resolved today in committee.
And can we all have a copy of the letter, please? Thank you.
Of course. On the outstanding resolutions then, are there any more comments or queries? Councillor Wright first.
It's in relation to the programme management updates, a general point and a specific point. Last time we discussed the progress of the AI project, and we're all aware how significant that is, both for the future efficiency of the council, but also financially in terms of medium-term financial plan. And subsequent to that discussion, I've had a couple of pieces of information. One, that I understand that one of the major strands of that project that will deliver significant financial and efficiency benefit this year in terms of adult social care has slipped, which obviously puts in jeopardy potentially a medium-term financial plan. And secondly, I joined an online conference of about 250 delegates where artificial intelligence being applied to local authorities was the sole element of discussion, and it was actually delivered by the company that is delivering AI projects to Derby City Council, and the vast majority of the presentation focused on what this company was doing for Derby City Council and the significant savings, both efficiency, but more importantly for me, cash savings that would accrue to the council. Now, obviously, this was a major sales pitch, as an IT company would do. And, you know, I had some reassurance in that the underlying software for this is Microsoft, which is obviously a global company. So I've got a lot of reassurance. But this company is a fairly small UK company that is developing this software for local government. And very much their pitch was, look what we're doing at Derby, you too can save tens of millions of pounds. Now, as a former IT salesperson myself, in my last company, I know that any endorsement by clients was something that was looked at very, very carefully to make sure that you know, we weren't putting clients' reputation at risk, etc. Now, I've got concerns both with the internal feedback and with that you know, there's I mean, I'm hoping for the best because I'm a great believer in AI and efficiency it can deliver. So I want it to achieve very passionately. But my concern is that are we doing two things really? The potential the most important thing, is this project going to deliver? Is it going to deliver the benefits and also financial savings for the city? But also, are we going to have an impact on the reputation of the city as well if it doesn't? And, you know, everybody that's been involved in IT projects, particularly ones that, in relation to government, are notorious for their difficulties in terms of both delivering what they're supposed to deliver and the financial aspect. So what I'm asking for specifically is that when we do get an update on programme management, that we delve into what's happening on AI in particular. Because if there are any issues, we're best addressing them now rather than 12 or 18 months down the line. Now, I am reassured that Richard's on the AI governance committee, so he's got a first-hand view, and I know that he would feed back any issues. But I would also like us to make sure that we get some sort of a specific report, you know, on project issues, project risks, because it is such an important project. That's a specific. Generally, as a councillor, I feel a little bit frustrated that a lot of the projects are going in by the council that councillors don't get the feedback so that we can feed back to our residents. So what I've asked for directly to a couple of the projects around libraries, for example, that they do after each project board, a small communication, only highlights, you know, something that we can communicate to residents very, very easily. And they've agreed to do that. And I've asked them to make that available to all councillors, not just because I've got an interest in Chaddiston. But I don't see why that can't be available. You know, I understand there's probably over 100 projects, of which, you know, there'll probably be 10 or 12 that councillors would want to get a regular update on. I think it's not a difficult or a challenging ask to say, you know, if it's just 4 or 5 bullet points, what we've decided and what the impact of that is for the city. Thank you.
Would you like to reply to that?
Just one thing I want to add, Chair, and that's that, as Councillor Wright said, I am on the AI Compliance Board, and I have raised with them that there's the Audit and Governance Committee have an interest in what's going on there, and that's been noted. Hopefully there'll be some feedback coming from that board.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Yeah, I suppose I agree. I think we just got to be mindful that we don't duplicate any work that other scrutiny boards are doing. Because, for example, I'm on the corporate services and cost of living, and AI has come up a number of times on that board. So I just want to make sure, obviously, we don't duplicate what other boards are doing.
Good advice, noted. Thank you. Councillor Kerr.
It may be something I've missed, but I'm still getting complaints about Darcy and Ali and the way in which they work both on the phone and as a chat bot. And I just wondered if anybody had received an invitation as to how to report back particular concerns, or whether we're still waiting for that link for councillors to use to report back for improvements into the system.
I don't have an update on that, Lucy. I'll check and get back to you.
Councillor Clare, well, if you actually speak to Councillor Atwell, he's on the Corporate Services Board, so he might be able to feed back to that, because there was a presentation on that at the last scrutiny board.
What about how to respond back?
Yeah, yeah.
Councillor Bolton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think when we had this discussion at the executive scrutiny some months ago, I was pretty vocal then, and I remain to be pretty vocal, that I'm still getting many constituents who contact me instead of speaking, or they don't speak, do they, to Darcy and Ali, because the pure frustration of dealing with an automated system just doesn't work. And I tried it myself, and I gave up in the end. And I couldn't ring my local councillor because I'm the local councillor. So I think this really does need addressing, and I'm sure we were promised a report back, was it from Mr Bramall, when he was last at this meeting, saying that he would issue a report or indeed tell councillors what to do if they had any issues with Ali and Darcy. And I don't think that's ever materialised. Certainly I can remember it happening, but I haven't had anything. And I think it's crucial that we do, because it's the people of Derby that are suffering from this. We aren't giving the service to them if they've got a query, whatever that query can be. And I think most of the time it's a council tax issue or personal care issue, which people get frustrated about. And then local councillors get all the frustration from the constituents. And then we have to deal with it on their behalf. So I know it's a cost-saving exercise, but I don't think it is realistically, because the service isn't working. And we need to look at it very closely. If we're just looking at what's easier and a cost-cutting measure, then that's fine. But certainly I, as a local councillor, want to give a service to my constituents and the whole of the citizens of Derby and get the issues resolved, because it's not that easy at the moment. It's far better to speak to somebody on the phone or even face-to-face. I know from my personal experience, people like the reassurance of speaking to somebody themselves and discussing the issues, not to a robot. A robot isn't the way. Thank you.
Thank you for your experience and passion. Yeah, I think largely I'm in agreement, and I think many people are. Councillor Wright, do you want to comment?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd like to reiterate what Councillor Bolton has said. My residents are extremely frustrated, and what they are doing, they're bypassing artificial intelligence and coming to the councillors as a way of engaging with an actual human being. And when we're in a position, because we don't have the resources and the wherewithal to actually respond, it compounds their frustration. So putting aside the fact that there is ex-committee, Y committee dealing with AI and picking up some of the anomalies and the difficulties, the fact is we're not getting the feedback with respect to the efficacy of this infrastructure that was put in place, not tested appropriately, there to cut costs, etc. We understand that in a context of ever decreasing funding of local authority resources and funding as such. However, we are here as a council to provide a service to our community. And with respect to how we engage and making engagement accessible and meaningful, at the moment, my residents feel that they are being failed. So please, whichever committees has responsibility to monitor this, please get on and do that and feedback to the councillors on a regular basis in terms of ongoing improvements. Thank you.
Thank you. Well said. There's a couple of things here. First of all, so that it doesn't get lost, I believe I've heard that we were looking for a response from Andy Bramall. Can we chase that to try and get that in for the next meeting at the latest? Yep. Thank you. Next, we need to consider our remit and what scope we might have to apply an audit. It's very difficult when the measures aren't so clear, but there must be measures. Councillor Kerr?
I note later on the agenda we have the forward plan, and AI is part of that forward plan. So my feeling is that we've got Richard on the board, we're asking questions, we've got the scrutiny board asking questions. I think it's sufficiently covered. It is early days, but I think it's right that we continue to show an interest in it.
well said. I think that seeing the scoping of an audit for the plan might satisfy some curiosity on the matter at some point when that's ready. Any more comments or queries?
Thank you. Just a couple. Going back to the resolutions, the one from July 23 about e-learning is still unresolved, I guess. And I guess if we get a year out, is either time to make it happen or decide it's not important enough, is one observation. The second one was just around the annual governance statement and the report that is due to come in July. This was from October 23, Andrew Bramall. So just as a point of note, that was last committee, that was down to come in June. And I just think it's, if dates are slipping, the fact they're slipping or move should be highlighted so we can just keep track of those things. It's easy for things just to shift without us really being aware of them. And the last one was, again, a March 24 resolution about contract waivers, saying that committee members have been provided with this information. I, for one, haven't received any information on the contract waivers. So it will be good just to check whether that information has gone to everybody.
Thank you. Richard, do you want to respond to those comments?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, regard to the first one, we're having difficulty sourcing any e-learning package for around counter fraud. It may end up having to try and write one of our own, which is time consuming. But there's nothing out there. I've spoke to a few firms as well, and they don't produce anything. The people we buy the 4 policies from as well are unaware of any particular e-learning around counter fraud. So, and again, it's going to be a cost to that as well. So that's what the delay is on that one. And just to pick up what Tony was mentioning about the report that's coming to the July meeting that should have come to today's meeting. Yeah, I mean, we were aware of that, but unfortunately, Andy, Bramall, Sinead and Olu are in a meeting with the ICO, so there was no one available to bring that report. So, I mean, the meeting with the ICO was around something about consensual audit, so it might be something that committee want to know a bit more about anyway in July. So at least this will be, they can add to the information that's being brought to committee in July. That's why they're not here today.
Thank you. I appreciate that. One comment that I would make is that if we've invited somebody to respond to something in a committee and they can't attend, they really ought to submit their response in writing in advance, and that's something we can put on the record and try to enforce in future. Thank you. Councillor Kerr.
I'd just like to turn round the lack of any e-learning on counter fraud. This is a commercial opportunity for the council, that we can write it and we can sell it, or we can ask our provider to say we will provide it if you pay us to provide it, and then you can sell it to everybody. Can't we look at this as a way that we can be leading and helping with our finances at the same time?
So it's an interesting thought. Perhaps we could pass the thought on to the relevant parties for consideration. Thank you. Councillor Wright. Cecile Wright.
Yeah, thank you. Now that we have our combined authority in place, can I just say, Chair, that within this geographical space, we have several leading universities and leading business schools, including the one at Nottingham University where I'm based. So is it worth perhaps exploring the university departments, whether they can assist you in terms of this e-learning learning provision? Thank you.
So it's another good thought that we can be considered offline, yeah, if we record the thought. Thank you. Councillor John Wright.
Yeah, just another suggestion. The NHS do a huge amount around counter fraud, and as another public body, I suspect they'll probably have off-the-shelf training. I know we'd have to tinker it a bit for a local authority, but it's worth a try.
Well, a helpful committee we're being to the interested parties, but that's more great feedback. Thank you. Mr. Webster.
Yeah, just to be even more helpful, in my previous job, we did manage to source external e-learning. So if Richard likes, I can dig out the details and pass them on to another firm we used. And obviously, it's then for him to decide whether it's good enough or the right thing for Derby, but they can do that.
Thank you. Indeed, any other thoughts, any other suggestions would be welcome, I'm sure, given the challenges that have been faced. So thank you. Okay, returning to outstanding resolutions, are there any more comments or queries? Councillor Wright.
Yeah, can I just say, I'm new to this, so I'm here to learn your procedure, your processes, etc. But I was just thinking, in terms of outstanding resolutions, would it, in addition to other information that's provided, a sort of a timeline for completion of the resolution? Is it possible to put some deadline in, or is that, yeah, is that unrealistic? Thank you.
Want to come back on that?
It's not my report, Chair.
We could put a timeline in there, but yeah, quite a lot of them, it tends to be quite flexible. So I can put it in there, but I'm not sure whether it, yeah.
Is that something you'd like to ask for officially?
Obviously, I don't want to increase the workload of decreasing staffing. However, it would help.
Mr. Sunderland.
That's basically the same point as I made earlier on, that you really need a few dates in there for one of those little things. And it should be able to reasonably easily incorporate it without too much effort. So it just needs tying down a bit more, I think that's all. Well, right. But if they do shift, should we know why they've shifted? Not because you think they ought to shift them. Sorry, Tom. Because there's some reasonable reason as to why they've moved. Yeah.
Councillor Kerr.
I think it'd be quite simple to put another column in the table, which is target date. And if the date changes, it could be noted as revised when the date changed. We can all go back to previous papers to look at see what that is, but it would alert us to there being a change.
Agreed. Resolved then that a target date and a rationale for delays can be included in future reports. Are we comfortable with that? Any concerns or objections? Thank you. Returning then to outstanding resolutions, are there any more queries or comments? Thank you. Moving on then, the next item on the agenda is an update from external audit. I can hear the deafening noise of silence, so we don't have external audit. We've already discussed the matter of complaining, and that letter will be dispatched quite quickly. Yes.
If anything's happening with the external audit, Alison can usually give us an update of what's happening, if anything.
There are no updates that I'm aware of from the pre-meet.
So I am your external auditor for 23-24. I've not been to the committee before, so I thought I'd steal some time just to say hello. I'm Mark Surridge, audit partner at Forvis Mazars. We have been in dialogue with the finance team about planning our 23-24 audit, and also maintaining watching brief about our responsibilities around the value for money arrangements, including our review of press releases, particularly around Sinfin. That's something that we are keeping an eye on. Ultimately, we have a plan in place to get through the 23-24 audit, but aforementioned general election and impact on the backstop is something we will have to monitor, because we won't be able to issue an opinion. We can do work, but we can't issue an opinion until the previous year is closed. So there could be a moving a target that sits around all of that. But our intention is to get through all the audit, and I seem to recall our objective is to get 24 finished by the end of March 25.
Thank you and welcome. It is nice to have our new external auditors attending. And I assume you can attend more regularly. I mean, the bar's pretty low, but I assume you can attend. Yeah. So thank you for that. Does anybody have any questions for external auditors?
Just really, I mean, obviously, you can't sign off for a subsequent year until obviously the previous years have been signed off because you've got all the carry forward figures and everything else. So, you know, that's a practical thing. So, but you can do a lot of work, which is what you're going to be doing. That's correct, is it? A lot of the basic work, the systems, the reviews and so on. So you can get that done. So when you do come down to would you do the final accounts work, for instance, when it becomes available? Obviously, a while off yet, but...
So we will do everything that we possibly can do, apart from opening balances.
But 100% improvement on the last meeting. Are there any more queries or comments? Well, thanks again for coming. The next. Councillor Kerr.
I feel, and I haven't discussed this because we don't have any informal meetings, but I very much feel that our role as a council is to enable you as external auditor to be able to do your job as much as anything else. So if you were to have any issues with the support that you're given by the council in enabling you to do your work, then that is something that I hope that the Chair, Vice Chair would be pleased to hear about.
Absolutely, agreed. Mr. Webster.
Thank you. The last we heard, there was government consultation about a backstop date in for the end of September for the previous accounts. I'm not sure where that's got to. Do you have any knowledge? Can you give us an update on that position, please?
So there was a number of consultations that went through. The outcome of most of those consultations couldn't be issued because of the calling of the election. The decision on what a backstop date is, and as a consequence of that, how that informs the audit reporting process needs ministerial action. That can't be done until there is a minister in place. So until that comes through, what time frame it may or may not be is a little uncertain.
Thank you for explaining much more beautifully than I did the consequence of the election. Are there any more queries or comments? Okay, thanks again. Look forward to seeing you at the next meeting and perhaps an update in that meeting on your approach. Item number 7 on the agenda then is internal audit report for 2023-2024 and head of internal audit opinion. Every member's had a copy. Do you want to present on the matter?
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, just wanted to cover just a few key points. Don't want to really reiterate what's in the covering report and the annual report itself, other than to say the key points from my point of view are I was able to offer a satisfactory opinion based on our work in 23-4 and also on other areas of assurance that we've got via other sources that are outlined within the annual report. The other thing that I have to do with the annual report is to say that how we've conformed with the public sector internal audit standards. We were assessed on an external one in October 22. We came out very well with that. There were no actual changes to our working practices in 23-24, or there will be in 24-25 because of the new internal audit management system that we're bringing in. So as far as I'm concerned, we still conform with that, and I've tried to demonstrate that within the report. One thing I will say is that the public sector internal audit standards as they are at the moment, the Global Institute of Internal Auditors have brought out some new global standards for internal auditing, and how they affect the public sector will be determined over the next few months. Clearly, CIPFA, Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, are one of the standard setters for local government internal audit. We'll be having a look at those standards and looking at whether to reproduce another public sector internal audit standard, which we understand will be coming in from April 2025. There should be a draft coming out at the end of September 24, so we'll see exactly what they are going to suggest. Because global IIA standards don't take into account the public sector. They cover all internal auditing, so there's not public sector specific. So we need something more geared to the public sector, and hopefully CIPFA will deliver that again. The only other thing I want to add is around the Quality Assurance and Improvement Programme. Again, it's something that I need to report through to you. I bring through regular updates on how that's working with progress reports. What I will say is the key one for us last year was around the procurement of a new internal audit management system, which we've done, and we're having the fun of implementing that at the moment. It's not fully embedded yet, and it will be several months at least until it's properly embedded into our working practices. And of course, the new standards will also impact on the 24-25 QAIP going forward. The report has been updated since the one that was originally produced, because David Webster was able to spot an issue that we've had with our one of the tables in there, which we've now resolved, and that's all in there. Nothing in that table would change my opinion. So that's the one thing I need to say to you. The fact that there was an issue there doesn't change the opinion. But I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. And another great demonstration of the value of our co-opted members. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Wright.
It's a comment, really. I think the council should be commended to be in a place where its satisfactory system of governance, risk and internal control reflects on the council departments, etc., and also Richard and his team for assuring that as well. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sunderland.
Just a couple of things, really. On page 4, you use the word sufficient work, sufficient resources. Are you suggesting you don't have a sufficient? Sufficient seems to crop up the word several times there. Just on one, that's one question. The other one on towards page 8, you talk about attendance at various council board stroke groups. Now, if you attend these, obviously it's time out of your day to do these things. Are you required to attend them? Do you request them? Because if all the time you're attending meetings or whatever else, you're not doing any real work, if I could use that expression. Sorry, but I don't really mean that. You're not doing any hands-on audit work. So do you do it by request, or do you require, or how do you attend these things?
If I take them in order, the first one, the use of the word sufficient. One of the things that we've always had with our, certainly when COVID was about, the thing that CIPFA were always saying was, as heads of audit, you need to make sure you've got sufficient. And that was, so basically what I look at is, in my mind, have I and my team done enough work for me to make an opinion? And yes, we have done. I mean, I use the word sufficient because we haven't done the totality of the plan. There's still areas outstanding. We still have, these issues, and the chair did write to service directors and heads of service about this issue. We've still got the engagement issue going on, which does slow us down a bit. But my perception is that from what I've seen, and with the support of my two group auditors, we feel we've done enough work at Derby City Council across the 23-24 year for us to make an opinion. So that's why we use the word sufficient. On the other aspect, around the attendance of boards, it tends to be at sort of the higher level within the audit section anyway. Myself, Martin, for example, and Hannah will attend these type of things. Is it on request, or do we sort of force our way in there? A bit of both, really. Sometimes we are requested to go along. What I would say is that we use our attendance there to actually inform our own assurances. So it's not wasted time. It's not like the proper audit. We're using it as another assurance area. So, for my example, I'm attending the AI Compliance Board. I can sit on there and I can see the debate that's going on there. Are they challenging the right areas? So that then helps me think, well, yeah, I can take comfort from the fact that they are asking the right questions, challenging other areas. So that gives me the assurance that things are working well. But we can also see when things aren't working well, and that, again, we can either then say, well, okay, ask questions there, and that adds into our assurance or non-assurance, or does that then affect our audit plan going forward, and do we move this into the indicative plan as, I say, a quarter 3 or quarter 4 one? So it's not wasted time, it all adds to the assurance level.
Just come back slightly on that thing. So you're not giving any assurances at these meetings that systems are okay. You're not prejudging any future work. They're not going to say on this board, well, of course, internal audit here, and you didn't say anything about that when you attended the meeting. But I'm just conscious that you don't want to be seen to be doing that in any way, because, you know, you don't want to be prejudging anything, and you don't want anybody taking some false assurance on something that is going on when it's all in progress, if you get my meaning. Yeah.
What tends to happen is, for example, we had one of the auditors sat on the new financial management system on the board there. What we did then was we did a memo afterwards to say what our opinion was. Yes, when they're out there, they can suggest things. They might say, well, are you sure that that is the right course of action? Have you thought about the risk of that? I mean, we will challenge at these type of things, but we won't sit there and categorically say, yes, we can give you 100% assurance. Well, we never give 100% assurance, but we wouldn't say, you can take it from us, here's our assurance. There is a danger, I admit, that people will go, well, internal audit were there and they didn't say anything, so therefore they were happy with it. Right. But we have to make sure that we are there in a watching brief, effectively. I make it clear that when I'm at these things that I'm there because I want to see what they're doing and get assurance, and it's feeding in to our audit process. So, and as the chair mentioned earlier, we will put together a brief, say, on the AI stuff, and it will include, the fact of what we're seeing at these various boards.
Thank you. Mr. Tolman.
Thank you. Yeah, 2 or 3 points, if I may. I'll take them one at a time. Page 8, and I've mentioned this before, you've talked, Richard, in the report about number of risk acceptors recommendations increasing, which is an indication of a change in risk appetite and tolerance of the council. It's the first bullet point on page 8. And I think the whole governance regime flows from your risk appetite and your risk tolerances, and I'm not aware of any change in risk appetite or tolerance having come to this committee. I'm not saying for approval, but for us to oversee it. I've been having an offline dialogue with Sarah Walker. I know Sarah's due to come next month with a risk update, and I'm just wondering whether it feels appropriate that we should be able to ask next month what changes to the risk appetite have there been, how they're approved, and how we should oversee those. I really think that's something that we're not great at doing since I've been on this committee, and the tolerances that flow from that. So if we don't know what they are, we don't know what level we should be comfortable with governing against. So what's not a thing for Richard to respond to, but I think that's really quite an important point for this committee to understand how those things are, what our appetite is, how they're changed, and are there, and how we monitor that. It's just a view. A couple of small points before people fall asleep on me, if that's okay. On page 12, Richard, we talk about the PCI compliance situation where we're getting charged £12,000 a year, roughly, between £800 and £1,200 a month on page 12, and we've not been compliant since 2018. And I just wonder whether it's time we dug into that as to why it's now 2024. I don't think compliance is something you can choose to do or not. And if we and why after 6 years are we not compliant? I'd personally like to understand more around what the council's doing about becoming compliant. I'll stop at that point in case there's a response needed.
I mean, I can't comment on why the council are not complying with this, other than one of the issues we did raise about this is PCI compliance tends to fall between many stools again. There's no one overall person that's got responsibility for it, and that's always an issue. So, but I mean, again, it's down to the committee whether they wish to delve into this further and would want to someone to come along and explain to them why this situation is as it is.
Councillor Kerr, we'll come back to that. Councillor Kerr.
Yeah, this is something that I had highlighted when I read the papers, and I would welcome to know why. There may be a good reason, but if there is, I think we should hear it.
Mr Dolmans, do you have other points to raise?
Yes, I do, sorry. Two more and I'll stop. On page 15, we're talking about the recommendations at schools, Richard. And you've got a lovely table. I think the table at the top of page 15 talks about there are 107 recommendations that you guys made as part of that. I was concerned that of those 107, only 3 have been implemented, and 36 that are action due are effectively overdue. And I was just sort of interested into why so soon after doing audits we've got 36 actions which people probably thought they could achieve have now slipped. Feels concerning to me.
Unfortunately, I look to Hannah, who can't be here today, but we can get a response back to you. But I can't give a full response on that at the moment.
Yeah, thank you. My starting point for this issue was the earlier table, which I think it was on top of page 9 maybe, top of page 10, which says that there are 3 plus 7 schools, which makes 10 in my additions. And I wondered why we were now talking about 9 schools, as we do on the later paragraph. I also noted the large number of recommendations that were highlighted there, and we haven't looked at all schools. And if some of these are things that particularly if they're things that several schools have had identified, I think we should be sharing that learning with all our schools, and potentially, depending on their severity, on the schools that are providing a service to Derby children, even if they're not LEA schools. And I just wondered whether there was any sharing of knowledge in that way.
To just explain the 10, it's the 9 schools plus the overall report that we do. What happens is each year we're looking at the school's financial value standard and schools' compliance with that. We don't visit every school every year, so we visit a third each year. So the other 2/3 do a self-assessment that they send in, and of course everything's fine. You know, the schools are but when we go out, we find a lot more issues. So what we have to do is we produce a report then for the Section 151 officer, Alison, to sign off, because there has to be a report through to the Department of Education that, you know, how everyone's going. So we give the assurance to Alison that she can sign off various things. So, you know, we'll report on our percentage of the third of schools that we've looked at that year. So that's why there's 10. There's 9 schools, and the other item in there is the overall report, which gives an overall assurance on what we've looked at. I mean, what we do find is a lot of the recommendations that we made, because they are around the financial value standard, they're always about issues within there. There are, and this year particularly, there was quite a few schools that were falling foul of the same thing. It goes into a report. I'll again need to check with Hannah as to actually how we disseminate all that information.
Just for clarity, is that shared learning disseminated or not?
I'll need to clarify with Hannah on that one and what she does.
Do you have any other points?
Yeah, one more.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. The final one, on page 17, halfway down, Richard, there was one audit, the Transparency Code, brought forward from 22-23, that were still not completed by March 2024, because management are still trying to work out who owns it, bluntly. Can we resolve that after 16 months, the what's the word? The chief executive ought to appoint an owner of that report, so we can start to see some traction on it. I don't think you can have a report that 16 months in, we haven't even worked out who owns the report in the council yet. It just seems poor governance and poor management.
Yeah, I was going to raise a similar point. I mean, one thing that occurs to me that 16 months, almost 18 months after an audit reports have been issued, you'd have to question whether the report or the findings in it are still valid, and hopefully Richard can still give us an assurance on that. And the other thing, similarly, I wondered if that was something that this committee should receive an update on, because it's taken so long.
Okay, we've got a fair bit to unpack there, so let's just take it in order. First things we talked about were the risk appetite, changes in the risk appetite, my initial thought on that is that we're expecting Sarah Walker into the next meeting anyway, aren't we? Yeah. Please can we ask Sarah for an update on those changes and the process and how that involves this committee in time for that next meeting. That's point one, I think. Point two on PCI compliance. There was a great comment. You can't choose what you comply with. Yeah, agreed. So what current work is going on, and if members feel appropriate, can we widen the scope and do a deep dive on that?
I just wonder if it's the owner of PCI compliance comes and tells us why he's not compliant and what his plans are to become compliant.
Do you know who the owner is right now? Subtle. Okay. Is this could well be the first summoning to committee then? If whoever that person is, let's invite them to the next meeting to account for the PCI compliance matter. That's point two. Point three. Richard, can we rely on you to have a discussion with Hannah about the matters raised in the sharing of best practice?
Just to let you know that with the dedication of my staff, even though Hannah's not feeling very well today, she's sent me some responses to Councillor Kerr's queries. What she's saying is, in terms of sharing information with other schools, the audit programme is based on the school's financial value standard guidance. So the schools actually know what they should be doing to adhere to the guidance. It's there in front of them. All we're saying is you're not actually adhering to it. So they're not formally shared, but doing the self-assessment is a reminder to schools what they should be doing. So again, it's there. They're seeing when they do the self-assessment that they should be doing that. And Hannah said there's little value in telling the schools that those visited didn't comply with certain parts of the guidance. What Hannah's basically saying is the guidance is there in front of them. They know what they should be doing, and some of them aren't.
Okay, thank you. That's the fastest update we've ever received in this committee.
Sorry.
Councillor Kerr, do you want to respond?
Sorry, Chair, just one other point in that we've got highlighted to us that the recommendation station and the large status, and this is page 19, and this highlights that the largest section is the actions due. And some of this may have happened, but we haven't got the data back into the system. Let's hope that's the case. But I was wondering whether there had been significantly more recommendations made during the last year than previous years, and whether there's any evidence that we are finding not just that recommendations aren't being delivered, but there are more recommendations, and whether anyone's looked at that as a trend. And it would obviously be dependent on the number of investigations that have gone on over the relevant periods.
Has that been assessed as a trend?
I mean, we don't normally look back on previous recommendations. I'm just going to just trying to find what we said in last year's report as to the number of recommendations then, so that will give us some idea. I'm sure we've issued less this year, to be honest. I may be proved wrong in a second or two.
I mean, we don't mean to put you on the spot. If you want to conduct your research
nearly
and
there.
present back, nearly there.
It says the percentage of recommendations made in the year that have been closed is considered to be lower than in 22-23 at 47%. But we don't know whether that is from a much larger number of recommendations, which could be worrying, or whether it isn't.
I was correct, it was less this year by 3. It was 178 last in 2022-23.
So on the back of that feedback, we need to decide as a committee what we want to ask for.
Sorry, my point was that, and that's a great point about the recommendations. The bit I made was about the schools being a lot higher as well, but I think it's a wider point.
In my view, this is something that the senior officers of the council need to be aware of, and I think that these are a little bit of more work to be done to look at the trends in the number of recommendations and the completion of those. And there might also be some work looking at the numbers which are looking at actions that are for significant risks and those for slight risks and so on. And if there's a trend there, then I think there needs to be a report to the senior management team so that they are aware of the risks that are not being addressed and the trends and the emphasis that needs to go down to heads of service or whoever is going to action these as an emphasis on delivery of what's being requested.
Is that something we're in a position to do? Okay, can we take that as a resolution to that matter then for now, and perhaps present back to a future meeting on progress with that? The final point that I was hoping to unpack, and I appreciate all the feedback, was ownership of issues. And I'm not sure what members feel about this, but my approach to this has always been, in the absence of an owner, it's the leading authority in the organisation. So if there is no owner associated to a risk or an issue, then that should be associated with the chief exec, who can then delegate the matter as he sees appropriate. Are we all in agreement? Can we do that? Are there any more comments or queries? Councillor Wright.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Page 11, system and risk audit. I just wanted to highlight what he said here about limited assurance for 7 others, and what it does, it lists management of school exclusions. As we know that school exclusion, a young person being excluded from school is likely to have implications for their future prospects. And also there is the law for land is that those that are eligible to education have a statutory right to be educated. So I think one needs to look at how this unfortunate situation for a young person being excluded is being managed, and managed effectively so that they can participate in education. So I'm just asking here.
Is that assurance something we're in a position to give or receive?
A lot depends, of course, on the scoping of this audit and whether it picked up things that Councillor Wright is thinking about. And when we look at certain things, we don't look at the whole system. It's not a complete overview of school exclusions. It's certain aspects of it. We haven't got the time to do everything, so we just look at certain areas.
Hopefully that answers the question, but to extend on that, there is an opportunity in item 9 to consider the future audit plan, and if there's something that you can feel compelled to have included in that plan, you can raise it in that section.
Yes, please.
Any more comments? In which case, Mr. Dole.
Yeah, it's sort of about the report, but also 2 or 3 months ago, you wrote to the service leaders to encourage them to, what's the words, to express our concerns about some of the timeliness, responsiveness, and some to the audits. I just wondered whether Richard's seen in the last 2 months any improvement in responsiveness, in timeliness, and actions being closed, because I think that's quite key, really, from what we've seen throughout this report about overdue actions, numbers being, yet to be closed. That, if that note hasn't achieved a step change, then we may need to be a little bit more aggressive, is the wrong word, but assertive in how we get people to respond to us.
In a word, no, I've not. I mean, a couple of heads of service have contacted me, but that's about it since the email went to them.
But personally, I had a couple of responses, one very supportive and one just basically acknowledging. I do accept your point. There's a time to be a lion and a time to be a lamb, and we've been quite cautious in our approach, and perhaps it is time to ramp it up. But given the timing of the letter, perhaps the next meeting is the appropriate time to consider our next steps. So it's a point well made. Thank you. Hopefully every member had a copy of the letter and that didn't come as a surprise. Are there any more comments? Okay. In that case, we can move to item 8 on the agenda, which is a review of the effectiveness of internal audit. And the conclusion in point 4.34. Any comments or observations? In which case, I believe we just note the report and thank you for your time. Mr. Donald.
Yeah, no, just again, I think it's just indicative of the engagement that on page 7, Richard makes a point about surveys. You only got 8 surveys back out of 29 rated audits. So there's 21 haven't bothered to respond to you. Just sort of an observation again about perhaps the level of engagement and that we see.
Agreed. Noted. Councillor Kerr.
And just to highlight what we've just been saying, that 429 is looking at the seeking the consistent and full implementation of recommendations, which is an issue. And I think, we can talk about this lots of times, but if it's not happening, then you have to ask what's actually the value of internal audit, because it's coming up with identifying problems. If we're not addressing them, then there was no point in going in and identifying them.
It's almost worse putting the spotlight on and then not doing anything about it. Yeah, I agree. Mr. Webster.
I just wanted to ask about the vacant IT auditor position. I know, again, from my past life, that IT audit is difficult, but it is something that it's an area that internal audit needs to look at. And I wondered if it's been considered whether you could actually buy in IT audit work or cover.
We do have a very experienced IT auditor at the moment, but it's just one person. We have had, what we've tended to do in the past is give work experience, not work experience, but the year experience that they need for university students, usually from the University of Derby has been the key one, to come along and work for us for a year. Some have stayed on with us. Unfortunately, the money being thrown around in the private sector means that we're not able to keep these people. But yeah, one of the things we had was a backstop with KPMG at one stage, where if we needed any additional work, either with internal audit or IT audit, then we could do that. But as the partnership is expanding, we're going to be looking at a restructure of the partnership over the next year. So there might be some potential to bring in another IT auditor. It's something we need to do, and we acknowledge that.
Any more comments or queries? Thanks, members. That's noted then. Item number 9 on the agenda is the internal audit plan for 24-25, quarter 2. Everyone's had a copy. Any comments or queries, Councillor Wright?
Yeah, a comment first of all that it's a lot in there, but all I think necessary items are already discussed. AI of particular importance, and the second is a request for something else to go in it. Sinfin Waste Plant. It's 2009 since the contract was awarded. July last year, we had a £93 million bill for settlement with the company that was going to run it. And in January of this year, another 93 million invoice. And in February, at the medium-term financial plan, the chief executive stated that Derby City had never been in such a perilous position. He used the word perilous in relation to finance. What I would like to ask is, and I've asked internally first, have we actually ever reviewed this project to see what it means for lessons that we can learn moving forward, but more important at the moment, implications of what might lie ahead for us as a city council and residents of Derby. The answer I got was that a couple of years ago there was I think probably last year there was and perhaps other members of this committee before I was joined it, there was an internal review that looked at some of the legal implications, but no formal review of the entire project as a whole. And that apparently that legal review took place, and that's finished and it was done. And taking Councillor Wilson's point earlier, I don't want to duplicate anything that might be done elsewhere, but I think now is the time, probably well overdue, for us to actually look into the governance of that project. Now, the reason why I'm a little bit, reticent is because it doesn't just involve Derby City Council, it involves the County Council as well. And I take Richard's advice in terms of how we come together and whether A, they would want to, and B, how we actually do it. So it's not necessarily just an internal Derby review. So rather than, I think it's a real, well, I would put it probably number one of priority issues for an audit and governance committee at the moment, recognising all those issues. But I was going to recommend that Emily Feenan, as head of corporate governance, that we ask the chair to meet with Emily, and if my concerns are supported by the rest of this committee, I'm certainly aware that residents of Derby are extremely concerned about this, and it's achieved a lot, it's in the local media a lot at the moment, that we ask the chair to meet with Emily and decide how we go about this, because I do recognise it's a sensitive issue for a whole host of reasons, but my real driving point is the whole viability of the council. We've seen other councils go down this route and to not very good ends, and we're in a difficult position at the moment, and I would like us all to know as councillors and residents what this means for the future. So I hope that makes sense, and the way forward is something that we can discuss.
Well, thank you. So the purpose of a meeting would be to consider the scoping of a potential audit.
Yeah, scope and how you actually go about it when it involves other partners. It goes. I'm not even sure whether the county council are part of your internal audit group, but obviously there are vested interests as well in both councils, and so my personal preference from my experience in other public sector organisations is you get somebody external to do it for you, whether that's another authority or whether you which I wouldn't want to do, or you actually pay a set of experts to do it, but my preference would be for the former. But I do recognise all the sensitivities, both financial and political, that asking somebody else to look over our business.
Thank you. I believe CMAP can be considered an independent party. Correct.
We are a partnership. We're hosted by Derby City Council, but it's there are 7 partners But as Councillor Wright said, the Derbyshire County Council is not one of them.
Derbyshire County are not on there.
They're not a partner in doing that now.
So first things first, are we loosely on board with the principle? Councillor Kerr.
I just wanted to bring into this, in last significant report that we had, movement on Sinfin, I think was to have a study back on what the options were for the plant. Now, I've not seen any report back on that, but I think that may cover some of the issues. It doesn't cover the learning issues in terms of how to manage giant inter-authority projects, which a study could look at, but I'm not sure there's going to be another giant inter-authority project coming along just now. And there's also the other issues about how this particular project works and whether there's learning from that. But in looking forward, that report on what the options are, some sort of options appraisal, I can't remember the actual wording that was given, but that is something that I don't think has come back yet. Whether it's been made available in draft or whatever, I don't know. But that would seem to be a fairly key document, and I expect it's highly secret.
Thank you. Councillor Riley. Councillor.
Could I just clarify a point? I wasn't thinking about lessons learned for other big projects. I was talking about lessons learned around governance issues for us as a council.
Thank you. Councillor.
Thank you. Do you think we also need to just seek legal clarification as well about it? Because obviously there's things that we can say, things we can't say. That's what I was saying. Yeah.
That's good, Council. I think that ought to be covered in the same meeting. So if a meeting was to take place, considering the scoping, the possibility, perhaps it would be a good idea for us to be together on that, so that we know what the scope of possibility is. In mind of the potential political issues, I'm happy to extend an invitation to any other party member who wants to attend that meeting. If anybody who I know, party politics and all that, but this is my attempt to keep it neutral. So if a member from any other party to the party to which I'm aligned wants to attend that meeting, you're very welcome. Perhaps you could let me know offline if you'd like to attend, and we can arrange that. Mr. Sunderland.
Just in accounting terms, I mean, quite clearly, Sinfin appears to be a bit of the elephant in the room in the sense as far as the accounts are concerned. And my reading of the accounts from last year, and I assume in the 3-4 accounts, this will arise as a contingent liability in the accounts of some size, and it won't be specific within the accounts. I think that's the way it works in the accounts. Is that correct? Yeah.
There will be a specific contingent liability within the account. We haven't got to that point yet, but yes.
No, you have to say there is something there. You don't know what it is.
Yeah.
That's right.
Thanks for that. Good to have clarity. So are we clear on the intent then is for a meeting to take place to discuss the scoping and the potential legal issues around the review, supported hopefully by the head of internal audit and any member who wants to attend to ensure political neutrality. Are we all in favour? Okay. Any concerns or objections before we resolve? Let's resolve then. Thank you. So back to the internal audit plan. Are there any other comments, observations? Councillor Wright.
Yes. Would it be possible to add the management of school exclusion to this? Although I do appreciate that it's probably an area that could be tackled in young people. Children and young people service. Yeah.
Well, this is the first we're hearing of it. Sorry, I just did.
Yes.
Is there any scope in the plan to include that as requested?
There isn't at the moment. The audit that we looked at last time was based purely on the new guidance that was coming out, so it wasn't looking at the management of the school's exclusions in entirety. It's a possibility we could look at. We'd need to talk to a few people to see what the risks are and how it fits into our overall assurance for this year, but it's something we can have a look at, and we'll report back as to whether it's something we wish to put into the next time. I'm certainly when I bring the Q3 plan. We'll talk about it then.
I appreciate that, thank you. So if you want to be quite specific about the required scope of such a review, then you can send that directly to Richard. You can factor that into his discussions. Councillor Kerr.
Given the time frame, Chair, on that, I was wondering whether there was something that the CYP board might look at. And maybe from what work they do, it might be clearer as to what work would be appropriate for internal audit.
I think it's a good point. Perhaps you can direct your feedback, yeah. On the audit plan then, any more queries or comments? Councillor Kerr.
Sorry, the item on commercialism, which I think is a strange word, and to provide assurance on the Council's commercialism programme, including the effectiveness of its 10 commercial principles, which I hadn't come across before, and I just wondered if anybody else was aware of it, whether it's been looked at within, I'm not sure which of the scrutiny boards, or is that news to everybody?
Is anybody aware?
We were invited to, we were told that they would liaise with internal audit on this, but Martin was the liaison point, but I understand from Martin that there's been no liaison on this as yet. So again, we're back to the engagement with internal audit.
Shall we resolve then to send an inquiry about that to the relevant parties?
Chair, whoever the relevant parties are.
I see. Can you make a link for us? Make an introduction? Okay, thank you. That's what we'll do. Good point. Any more comments or queries on the internal audit plan? Thank you, and thanks again for all the hard work that's continuing. Moving on then to item 10, the Audit and Governance Committee Annual Report. I want to thank Richard and his team for the assistance preparing the report. Are there any comments or queries? Mr. Webster.
Sorry, just one small point. I think maybe a typo. In the introduction page, it refers to the terms of reference that would go into be sought for the AGM in May 2023. I think it needs updating there.
Fair observation, thank you.
And on page 4, it talks about the committee held 6 meetings in 22-23. I think we should be 23-24, very top of page 4 on that.
Great, thank you. Another fair observation.
The minor ones, the only one returning councillor, and there was me, of course, I was on the previous one. There's an issue about something about where's it got to? Oh, right on the page 14, you've got co-opted member who had been on the committee since, and you need to put 2018 in there. There's obviously a year missing there.
Thank you. Have we captured those amendments, Tom? Thank you. Councillor Kerr.
Did somebody pick up the bullet point? Did somebody pick up the bullet point that starts with E, due diligence, on page 6? And my other point was, under training, additionally, committee members were provided with access to the Audit and Governance Committee handbook. I thought this ought to be shared with all members, and potentially it ought to be available to the public, and I just wondered if that could be considered.
Is that document available publicly?
Goes to council, doesn't it? It's not go to council.
That's okay, yeah. If we can check that, please, and respond.
Where does this report go? It goes to full council to inform them of what the activity has been.
Sorry, I know we were on cross purposes. I was still wondering if it's public.
The handbook.
Yeah.
I'll check that.
Okay, so we're checking that. This report goes to full council, following some slight revisions. Thank you for the feedback. Councillor Bolton?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think next time it really ought to be double-checked. Clearly what's been said are silly errors that shouldn't have occurred. And I think had it gone to our plain English panel, which we used to have monthly, whilst I've been on council, I think it would have failed miserably. But however, let's move on and learn from our mistakes. But my question was following on what Lucy said, is where's it going? Why have we produced such a glossy document, which probably would have cost a lot of money? So is it going to go, obviously it goes to full council, but where else is it going to go?
As far as I'm aware, just to full council. Is that right? Just to full council. The production costs were zero, and I accept all the points about minor errors. 1 second, Mr. Dolman.
Yeah, thank you. Just one point. On page 8, the third paragraph from the bottom, it talks about the head of internal audit has raised with committee concerns, blah, blah, about timescales. It sort of begs the question, what have we done about it? And just perhaps add that this committee has written to the officers to engage with them. Just sort of felt a little bit, there's been a concern raised and we've done nothing. I know we have done something, so I think it might just need a sentence to close that down.
I think that would improve the report. We can factor that revision in for the council's version. Are there any more observations? Mr. Councillor Wright.
Well, mine was to say thank you, really. Last year I raised the issue that the annual report was that long and complicated that even people who understand the business and worked in it would find it challenging to read. So I think it's a much better document. And the point was that although I don't think many members of the public would want to read it, it's actually now in a much better format that it can be shared electronically and people can make up their own mind. So I would certainly advocate that it is made public. There's nothing in there that you know, is really confidential to the City Council as far as I'm concerned, and the more transparent we can be, the better.
How do we feel about that, making this a public document? Are there any concerns about that? Councillor Kerr?
It will be a public document when it goes to full council.
In the agenda pack for full council, it will of course be made public. Yeah. Any more?
I suppose it's public now anyway, because it's on the. It is public now. So.
Already in its current form. So, members, then, if we're in favour to present this to full council with the slight revisions that we've discussed today, that's what we resolve. Thanks for your comments and feedback. Item number 11 then on the agenda, Audit and Governance Committee Draft Committee Work Programme for 24-25. Any comments or queries? Mr. Sutherland?
Do you come into this anyway? Are there any reports from the new auditors should be included in this, or any future reports, or has it not hit you yet?
At this point in time, we've deliberately tried to keep away from putting too many reports to the committee, just to confuse, in the aim of not confusing kind of which audit year is open at any one time. But it is something, you will get an outline plan from us, I think, in...
It's just an outline plan, a discussion about your rationale, the way you work, would be useful at some stage, as I mentioned earlier on. At some stage in the future. I don't know when timing-wise, or that would be sensible, but, you know, I'll leave that to you to just talk to the whatever you think.
Councillor Kerr.
We have an update from external audit as a standing item, so it could come at whenever it feels most appropriate. Maybe that's a discussion. Maybe that's a discussion between the chair and Mazars about what happens.
Any more queries or comments? Okay, in that case, thank you for your attendance and participation. That closes the meeting.